The wind howled like a warning that night, and by morning, nothing in the valley would ever be the same. If you stay until the end of this story, you'll understand why people here say the mountains don't just test your strength, they reveal your soul. And before we begin, if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because there are many more untold lives hidden in places like this. High in the mountains of rural Afghanistan, where the air is thin and every breath feels earned, lived a young man named Rahim. His home was a fragile mud house perched on the edge of a steep valley, surrounded by towering peaks that seemed to scrape the sky. Winters were merciless, summers were short, and survival was never guaranteed, it was negotiated day by day. Rahim lived with his aging mother, Zainab. Her hands were rough from years of work, her back slightly bent, but her spirit remained unbreakable. Since Rahim's father had passed away during a brutal winter storm years ago, the responsibility of survival had fallen on Rahim's shoulders. He was young, but life had forced him to grow old in wisdom. Every morning before sunrise, Rahim would wrap himself in a worn wool shawl and walk miles down the rocky slopes to a narrow river that cut through the valley. The river was both a blessing and a challenge. Its icy waters held fish, small, silver flashes of life, but catching them was never easy. The current was fast, the rocks were slippery, and the cold could numb your hands within minutes. But Rahim had no choice. That morning, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds. Zainab stood by the doorway, watching him leave. "Be careful," she said softly. "The mountains feel different today." Rahim smiled, trying to ease her worry. "They always do, mother." But deep down, he felt it too, an uneasiness in the air, like the earth itself was holding its breath. When Rahim reached the river, the wind had already begun to pick up. He knelt by the water, his fingers trembling as he prepared his simple fishing line. Hours passed. The cold seeped into his bones, but he stayed focused. Each fish he caught meant another meal, another day survived. Finally, after what felt like forever, he caught 3 fish, small, but enough. As he stood up to leave, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked him off balance. The sky darkened further, and in the distance, he heard a deep, rumbling sound. An avalanche. His heart raced. He looked up at the mountains and saw snow cascading down one of the distant slopes. It wasn't near his home, but it was a reminder. Nature here didn't forgive mistakes. Rahim hurried back, his steps quick and careful over the uneven terrain. By the time he reached home, the wind had turned fierce, carrying dust and cold air through the valley. Inside, Zainab had already lit a small fire. "You came back just in time," she said, relief flooding her voice. Rahim placed the fish down and sat near the fire, his hands stretched out toward the warmth. For a moment, there was silence, just the crackling of the flames and the sound of the wind outside. Then Zainab spoke. "Your father used to say, the mountains speak before they act. We just have to listen." Rahim looked at her, thoughtful. "And what are they saying now?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the fish and began to clean them carefully. "They're testing us," she finally said. That evening, Rahim grilled the fish over the open fire. The smell filled the small room, simple, but comforting. As they ate, the storm outside grew stronger. The walls creaked, and the roof trembled under the force of the wind. But inside, there was warmth. There was food. There was love. And sometimes, that was enough. Days passed, but the storm didn't fully leave. The river became harder to reach, the paths more dangerous. One morning, Rahim slipped on a frozen rock and nearly fell into the rushing water. He managed to grab onto a branch, his heart pounding as he pulled himself back up. That night, he sat quietly, staring into the fire. "I don't know how long we can keep doing this," he admitted. Zainab looked at him with calm eyes. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. "Your father didn't. He had me. And you have me too." Her words stayed with him. The next morning, something changed. Instead of going alone, Rahim asked a neighbor, an older man named Karim, for help. Together, they went to the river, using stronger nets and working as a team. They caught more fish in one day than Rahim usually caught in 3. It was a small change, but it made a big difference. Soon, others in the village began to join. They shared tools, helped each other repair homes, and worked together to gather food. The mountains were still harsh, the challenges still real, but now, they weren't facing them alone. One evening, as Rahim grilled fish for a group of villagers gathered around the fire, he looked around at the faces illuminated by the flames, tired, weathered, but smiling. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Hope. The wind still blew through the valley, the mountains still loomed large and unforgiving, but something had changed within them. They had learned that survival wasn't just about strength or endurance. It was about connection. It was about standing together when everything around you tries to pull you apart. And as the fire crackled and laughter echoed softly into the cold night, Rahim realized something his father had once known. The mountains may test your limits, but they also teach you who you truly are. So if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe, because somewhere, in places you may never see, there are lives like Rahim's, quietly fighting, quietly surviving, and quietly inspiring the world. The night the fire burned the brightest, was also the night the mountains struck back. If you're still here, it means Rahim's story has reached your heart. Stay until the end, because what happens next will show you that even hope must fight to survive in places like this. And if stories like these mean something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because every story you support keeps these voices alive. The days of working together had brought a fragile balance to the village. The shared fishing, the laughter around evening fires, the feeling of not being alone, it had begun to heal something deep inside Rahim. For the first time since his father's death, the weight on his chest felt lighter. But the mountains, they never allow comfort for too long. One morning, before dawn had even touched the peaks, Rahim woke to a strange silence. No wind, no distant rumble, just a stillness so complete it felt unnatural. He stepped outside, his breath visible in the freezing air. The sky was pale, almost white, and the mountains stood motionless, like watchers waiting for something to happen. Then he saw it, a thin crack running across the slope above the village. His heart dropped. "Mother," he called, rushing back inside. "We have to leave, now." Zainab didn't question him. She had lived long enough to recognize fear when it spoke through silence. Within minutes, Rahim was running from house to house, shouting warnings. Karim joined him, his voice loud and urgent, waking everyone. "Move to the lower ridge. Don't wait." Some hesitated, leaving their homes meant risking everything. But Rahim's voice carried something undeniable. It wasn't panic, it was certainty. And then the mountain answered. A deafening roar shattered the silence as the snow above them broke loose. The ground trembled, and a massive wave of white thundered down toward the village. People ran. Rahim grabbed his mother's hand, guiding her as fast as he could across the uneven ground. Behind them, the avalanche swallowed everything in its path, homes, tools, memories, erased in seconds. The air filled with snow and dust, making it hard to breathe, hard to see. "Don't stop," Rahim shouted, even as his own legs felt like they might give out. Finally, they reached the lower ridge, a safer distance. One by one, villagers gathered, their faces pale, their eyes wide with shock. And then, silence again. Rahim turned back. Where the village had once stood, there was nothing but a blanket of snow. No homes, no paths, no signs of life, just emptiness. Zainab's hand trembled in his. "Everything," she whispered. Rahim couldn't speak. His chest tightened, his throat dry. Everything they had built, gone in a single moment. But then he heard something. A faint cry. He turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Karim nodded. "Someone's still there." Without hesitation, Rahim moved forward. "Rahim, no," Zainab called. "It's too dangerous." But he stopped only for a second, looking back at her. "If someone is alive, I can't leave them." And before she could say anything more, he ran toward the destruction. The snow was deep, unstable. Every step was a risk. Rahim listened carefully, following the faint sound. Digging with his bare hands, ignoring the freezing pain, he searched. "Hold on," he shouted. "I'm here." The cry grew louder. Finally, he uncovered a small space beneath broken wood and packed snow, and inside was a young boy, barely conscious. Rahim's heart surged with relief. "I've got you," he said softly, pulling him out. The boy coughed, his eyes fluttering open. "Ami," he whispered. "You're safe now," Rahim assured him. Carrying the boy carefully, Rahim made his way back. His arms ached, his body exhausted, but he didn't stop. When he reached the others, a wave of emotion swept through the group. The boy's mother rushed forward, tears streaming down her face as she held her son tightly. Zainab looked at Rahim, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. "You risked your life," she said quietly. Rahim shook his head. "We all did, by staying here." That night, they had no homes to return to. The cold was harsher than ever, the wind unforgiving. But they gathered close, sharing what little they had: blankets, food, warmth. Loss hung heavy in the air. But so did something else: determination. The next morning, Rahim stood before the villagers. "We can't rebuild here," he said. "The mountain has already warned us. If we stay, it will take more from us." Karim nodded slowly. "Then where do we go?" Rahim looked toward the lower valley, a place they had always avoided because it was far, unfamiliar, uncertain. But now, it represented something else. A chance. "We go down," Rahim said. Together. The journey wasn't easy. Carrying what little they could salvage, helping the elderly, protecting the children, they moved slowly, carefully. Days passed. Hunger, exhaustion, doubt, they all tried to break them. But every time someone stumbled, another hand reached out. Every time hope faded, someone reminded them why they couldn't give up. And finally, they reached the valley. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't home, not yet. But it was safer. There was water, land to build on, and most importantly, a future. Weeks later, as Rahim stood beside a newly built shelter, watching the village slowly come back to life, he felt something deep inside him settle. Zainab joined him, her face softer than it had been in years. "Your father would be proud," she said. Rahim looked out at the people working together, laughing despite everything they had lost. "No," he said quietly. He would say, "This is what we were meant to learn." The mountains had taken their homes. But they had given them something greater. Unity, strength, purpose. And as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Rahim realized something he would carry for the rest of his life. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. If this story stayed with you until the end, then you understand its heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are many more journeys like this, stories of survival, courage, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, no matter how harsh the world becomes.